Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. This is Conversation Unplugged.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. You're listening to Rev Dr. Wayne M. Weathers on Conversation Unplugged. First of all, before I go any further, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. I haven't talked to you since last year, which was basically last week. So, this is definitely going to be a fruitful and productive conversation. We're off to a brand new year, some brand new stuff. Let me say that again. We're off to a brand new year and some brand new stuff, or could we just say same old stuff, brand new year. Hey man, we have Pastor Jerome Coleman from First Baptist Crestmont, my brother in Christ. Hey, how you doing, Pastor Coleman?
How you doing, Dr. Weathers? How's everything?
I'm doing good, doing good. Taking a little bit of different approach. I start off my radio show. I've been evaluating some things, and I was just like, hey, I got to do a little bit of different approach going into the new year. So, right now, my brother in Christ, there's a lot for us to unplug, unpack, and talk about today. I want to start off with a biblical scripture here that really sets the tone for how we're going to start off this conversation today. It says, James chapter 3, verses 5 and following says, even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. Oh, wow. Let me go on to say, but no man can tame the tongue. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessings and cursings. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Yesterday, we're going to talk about yesterday and 48 hours ago. Yesterday and 48 hours ago. I was watching the news, and, yesterday, although it happened this morning, the process was in place for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be certified as the president and vice president of the United States of America. At this particular point yesterday, history was made where Raphael Warnock, African-American pastor, Ebenezer Baptist Church, beat Kelly Loeffler, become the first African-American male senator of the state of Georgia in the Deep South, right? And then we later learned that, no, that was later on. And so we're supposed to be celebrating this particular moment at this particular time. And then I start seeing some feeds on Facebook about the march that was taking place to the Capitol, and then things just got out of hand. NPR reports the following. It says, over the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, people in charge of elections in both major parties have warned that his continued peddling of falsehoods about elections could one day lead to violence. Now, as a mob took over the United States Capitol on Wednesdays, those predictions have come true. Every elected leader who helped spread lies about American elections paved the way today, said Colorado Secretary Gina Griswold. Goes on to say, while many Americans looked at their televisions in shock Wednesday, those in charge of the election seem to have seen it as a natural evolution of a growing problem. Last sentence, and let's start this conversation. A large portion of the country now falsely believes that the electoral process is rigged and that therefore there may be no other alternative than taking to the streets. Yesterday, we witnessed a political insurrection on Capitol Hill, and 2 days ago, we witnessed a political insurrection here in the state of Pennsylvania. Pastor Coleman, let's start off this conversation and let's unplug this conversation. Political insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Tell me what happened yesterday.
Is what I posted on Facebook to our congregation and people who are friends of our Facebook. Is basically the chickens have come home to roost.
Mm-hmm.
It's what everybody is saying. You cannot lies have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for those of us who are Christian, we know that the consequences that we experience today, sin, is because of a lie that was perpetrated and a belief in that lie.
Right.
And
Right.
because of that lie, we're suffering consequences today. It's amazing how people could have thought that all these years of sowing lies and language of divisiveness and thumbing the nose at democratic processes and all of those things would not have any consequence.
Mm-hmm.
This was no surprise to anybody who's been watching this
Right.
for the last 40 years. This didn't shock any of us. I mean, what may have been shocking in terms of myself is the lack of security that exists at the Capitol building.
Right.
But, and but the response to the rioters, and that's you call them right, the rioters, the domestic terrorists, the insurrectionists, the response is what's shocking, or no, not shocking for many of us who are African Americans, because we're totally clear that if that was if that was black and brown faces, there would have been tear gas, there would have been bullets, there would have been people who were dead.
Most definitely. Most definitely. For us, I've been doing a lot of thinking, praying, meditating. Pastor Bruce Alec, president of the Pennsylvania Baptist State Convention, and myself, we had a virtual event last night. The president of Black Clergy in Philadelphia and Vicinity, Pastor Robert Collier, he has organized a town hall meeting tonight at 8 p.m. on Facebook. So let me put a plug in for our president, Pastor Robert Collier, of Black Clergy in Philadelphia and Vicinity. There is a virtual town hall roundtable discussion tonight, 8 p.m. on Black Clergy Philadelphia and Vicinity's Facebook page. So we encourage all to attend. And then also let me say that they are having a Martin Luther King worship service, virtual Martin Luther King worship service on Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Preacher will be Rev Dr Marshall Mitchell of Salem Baptist Church. So check out Black Clergy's Facebook page at 3:30 on Sunday as well. So, I'm doing some meditating. I'm thinking about this yesterday, thinking about this today, Pastor Coleman. We do see a double standard here, but to us, we knew this was coming. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking, and I was like, now, wait a minute. This man set up here when he campaigned 2015, 2016, said I could shoot somebody in Times Square and he could get away with it. And when you look at all that has taken place from now up until yesterday, when you look at the threats that was made against African American journalist April Ryan, because she disagreed with policies and she challenged him. And when she challenged him, not only did she receive death threats, but she had to get a personal bodyguard in order to, walk with her and her family just for her public safety. When we look at the one who accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual improprieties, of things of that nature, and the way those who came up against her, she had to go in hiding from where she lived. She ended up getting death threats and things of that nature. When you look at Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, the fact that their homes was vandalized and things of that nature. When you look at all that has gone on, whenever you go up against Donald Trump, if you say something negative against him, if you sneeze on him, if you cough on him, if you, do something that's negative towards Donald Trump, all of a sudden people are coming at you with death threats and threatening to do physical harm to you. And now all of a sudden now it comes as a surprise that they race up to the Capitol and they cause destruction. What I find amazing is the phraseologies that's being used. Because when the incident happened with Black Lives Matters, they were called looters. But this particular group is called mob. You got me? And so the phraseology here is real crazy. So let's walk through this whole entire process here. I got to take the energy down. That's cool. We got to take the energy down. What? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No, when you have a president that basically inflames the situation, and then you have Rudy Giuliani who inflames the situation, and you got Donald Trump Jr. that inflames the situation. What did folks expect not to happen? And the Proud Boys have been in D.C., right, staying in this particular hotel for the past couple of weeks. Did they not expect something to happen when they went to the Capitol? What's your thought there?
Well, that's what I'm incredulous at in terms of this is supposed to be a country that has the highest source of intelligence in the world. And watching all of this happening in the gathering in D.C., you would have thought that they would have been better prepared for something like this to happen. All of this is just a sign of having a president that has not only weakened us militarily, because what we look like across the world is a weak nation.
Yes.
Not only does it weaken us militarily, but he's weakened the moral fiber of people in this country. And because he's weakened the moral fiber, people have grown silent. Mm-hmm. And King said, a time comes when silence is betrayal. And those Republicans who remain silent, those Trump supporters who remain silent in the face of what they know were outright lies and deceits, they have betrayed their office, and they have betrayed this nation. And that's really what it's boiled down to. People are afraid to speak the truth. This culture has set it up that when you really speak truth, you get vilified. Right. Everybody who tried to come out and speak the truth in terms of Donald Trump were either lost their position or have no influence at all. And this is not just Donald Trump in terms of sowing this. These are people in our country, because you can't have this type of reaction unless people already have it in their hearts. Mm-hmm. And there is a significant number, not a majority. He lost by 7 million votes. Right. There's a significant number of people in our country who have this type of hatred, who are naive, who choose to be ignorant, who are nationalists, not patriots, mm-hmm. And really want this country to go back to an era where every ethnicity is subject to white people. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And I think that there are too many people who were ignoring the signs of this coming, hoping that this wasn't the case. The reality is that it is. And now moving forward, the question becomes, what are we going to do to start making it easier for people to speak the truth, and start making it more difficult for certain news outlets, certain social media outlets to insinuate, imply, or perpetrate lies. We have opinion commentators, and because they couch it under opinion, they really are perpetrating and insinuating lies. Right. And those lies are being believed, and they're inciting people. And when are we going to stop excusing, under the freedom of speech, people who are perpetrating lies? They're really shouting fire in a crowded theater where there is no crowd. And we know that freedom of speech stops where there is no fire. And we know that freedom of speech stops there. So when is it going to be that when somebody is insinuating or perpetrating a lie, we're going to shut that kind of thing down and say, no, you have a right to your opinion, but you don't have a right to lie. And we just don't have the moral fabric or the backbone right now to do that. And I'm praying that what happened, will cause people to actually understand that truth does matter.
So what we're going to do, Pastor Coleman, it's 15 minutes to the hour. We're going to go to a 15-minute, we're going to go to a 30-second to 1-minute station break, and then we're going to come back. You're listening to Rev Dr. Wayne and Weathers, guest Rev Dr. Jerome Coleman, Conversation Unplugged, WWDB 860 AM. Let's go to a station break.
They just told us right away that we're going to house you, we're going to feed you, and every single one of his medical bills is just all taken care of.
So they've saved my family from financial ruin. It allowed me and my wife both to focus on the most important thing, which was the health and well-being of our son.
We have phenomenal research, outstanding clinical care, and the generosity of public, which allow us to treat patients regardless of what it takes. And that's what makes St. Jude so magical.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, families never receive a bill for treatment, travel, housing, or food, because the only thing a family should worry about is helping their child live.
Doctors send us the toughest cases to be treated at St. Jude, and our patients come from all over the world.
When we come here, they told me, don't worry, everything's being taken care of.
We can never repay St. Jude for what they've given us.
Because of you.
Gracias a ti.
Because of you.
There is St. Jude.
It is 16 minutes past the hour on WWDB 860 AM. You're listening to Reverend Dr. Wayne and Weathers on Conversation Unplugged with my brother in Christ, one of my best friends, Reverend Dr. Jerome Coleman, pastor of First Baptist Crestmont, doing great ministries there. Just a quick shout out, Pastor Coleman. You are doing COVID testing at your church, right?
Yeah, we've been doing COVID testing since August, and the last count that I received, we tested about 7,000 people since August at that site. So that shouts out go to the Montgomery County Commissioners, Val Arcucci and Ken Lawrence for allowing us to be a COVID testing site.
Wow, to God be the glory. Now, one quick question. We're going to go back into the conversation. If someone in Montgomery County, Crestmont, Willow Grove, Jenkintown, Elkins Park, etc., is looking to get tested for the COVID virus, you are operating Monday through Friday. What are your hours of operation?
They're there 9 to 5 now. It was every other day, but 9 to 5. They're there Monday through Friday, and actually this Saturday they'll be there as well. This is one of those special days. So Saturday they'll be there as well. From 9 to 5, 9 to 1, from my understanding.
Well, good. Now, back to Conversation Unplugged here, and thank you for the great work that you're doing in ministry. I'm looking again at the NPR article, and it goes on to say here that it is a theme that predated Trump within the Republican Party and one that will probably plague American democracy long after Joe Biden is sworn in as president. A month ago, top election officials in Georgia, Gabriel Sterling, begged his fellow Republicans to stop spreading conspiracy theories about voting, as it was leading to death threats against officials of seeing the state count. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed, Sterling said at that time. But Trump, as well as many other Republicans in Congress, didn't heed those warnings. In a phone call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger over the weekend, Trump listed a number of debunked conspiracy theories, many of which spawned from extremist corners of the internet. On Wednesday, House Republicans mentioned some of those same conspiracy theories in objection during the Electoral College vote counting process, and less than 2 hours later, windows were shattered, at least one person was fatally shot, and the entire Capitol was overrun. Pastor Coleman, when I looked at what was taking place yesterday and I was reflecting on it this morning, what actually happened, and it's hard to believe this, Olympus Has Fallen played out yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's sad. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's sad, and this is this is the gasping of a dying party. The Republicans realize that the landscape of this country is becoming more moderate to liberal, and that the idea of conservatism is really dying.
Right.
And it is like we talked about in private. It's like when somebody's drowning and they're flailing at the end and gulping and gasping for air before they go under. This is what's happening with this party right now. They are gasping for air, and they're trying to do everything they can to survive. And so rather than changing and adapting, and I don't have whether you're conservative or liberal or moderate, that's not my concern.
Right.
All of us, wherever we find ourselves, find periods in our lives where we need to adjust. And rather than adjusting to the landscape while still holding to whatever conservative values they have, they'd rather lie and cheat and manipulate in order to remain the same as they are. I've said this several times. There are certain people in power who don't mind being the minority as long as they have the positions of authority. So we know the landscape is changing in this country. By 2030, there'll be more people of color than there'll be people who are white. We already know that. But there are certain factions that they don't care if that demographic changes as long as we hold the positions of power. So that was part of the power play for the Supreme Court. We've got that now. That's going to be conservative for years to come. That's why they were never really concerned about the House of Representatives. They were concerned about the Senate. The Senate really holds power.
Right.
And so as long as we can hold those two positions, it can be a flip in terms of ethnicity where we're in the minority as long as we hold the power. It's the same concept as when African Americans were slaves in this country. We may have outnumbered the master in terms of the plantation, but they held the power. So it really didn't make a difference if we had a greater number. We had a greater number, but we didn't have the power, and we didn't have the finances, and we didn't have the freedom. And that same principle mentality is still in effect. It's just a little more sophisticated. It's just moving through political and financial and legal spheres. But that mentality is still there. And that's why there needs to be a call out in terms of systemic racism. We need to be able to look at those things, point out those things, call out the truth of those things without being afraid to do it, and call for people to address it and to get rid of it.
Yeah, hello, Jamila. Melvin just commented, hello. Hey, Jamila, how you doing? And Kelly Isaac says, peace and blessings to you as well. I don't know if you and we talked about this in private yesterday. I think I picked up on this last night, but definitely got a greater insight this morning. It was amazing how when they stormed the Capitol, they tried to take down the American flag and tried to lift up the Donald Trump flag. There's something crazy about that, Pastor Coleman. There's something crazy about that they tried to take down the American flag. Now, nobody has called them unpatriotic.
Mm-hmm.
You got it? Nobody has called them unpatriotic. Had that been one of us, black and brown, we would have been called unpatriotic. Isn't it amazing how Kelly Loeffler tried to label Rev Dr. Jeremiah Wright as racist and extremist? You know what I mean? But none of the conservatives, as of yet, called them racist and extremists. And check this out, Pastor Coleman. Now they're trying to say, let's invoke the 25th Amendment because we're concerned about the mentality of Trump. Stop giving his emotionalism an excuse. Dude is a racist.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. The very people who are calling for all this, the Mitch McConnells and all that, they were the ones who sowed the seed for this.
Right. Yeah.
And now, you got Lindsey Graham, you got Mitch McConnell calling out Donald Trump. Man, you should have called him out 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
None of this is a profile in courage. All of these people resigning now, this is not a profile in courage. If you were really courageous, you would have spoke up years ago in terms of what this man was doing. Their silence is really complicity in all of this thing that has happened. When this election was fairly and squarely won by Joe Biden,
right,
and Trump started putting out this false narrative, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, all of those Republicans could have squashed this from the door by making a conservative. Mitch McConnell himself could have made a statement simply saying the election, there's no evidence of fraud, although we may have wanted our candidate to win, the other candidate won fair and square, and now we have to move on in terms of transition. None of this stuff that's happening right now would have risen to the level that it did if the persons who were in power as far as Republicans would have spoke up and squashed these lies from the beginning. So they are just as responsible, if not more, for what happened at the Capitol, because once again, their silence is what allowed this to happen. And people think that when injustice happens, they can just stick their head in the sand and not say anything. I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to say anything. That's the ultimate tragedy. The ultimate tragedy is when people become silent about things that matter. And when you become silent about things that matter, you actually become complicit.
Mm-hmm. So, what I found what I found amazing, Pastor Coleman, what I found amazing here, and before I go any further, if anybody would like to call in 1-888-329-3306, 1-888-329-3306. We talked about this yesterday. This definitely was buzzing on Facebook and within a lot of circles and things of that nature. Did you notice that there was no tear gas fired at them yesterday? No rubber bullets.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, no rubber bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Only 50-something people arrested. They broke the windows, went in the balcony of the House of Representatives, hung out of the balcony, sat in the Speaker of the House seat, went into her office, sat at her desk, and then now we getting reports and visual pictures now. They didn't just sit at the desk, they trashed offices, papers everywhere. And not yet, we don't hear the word looters. Take back our country. Law and order. What's up with that, Pastor Coleman? I'm sorry. I'm just going off a little bit.
This was the law and order president. Remember?
Right.
This is why a lot of people were coming out talking about how safe they feel because this is the law and order president. This is the amazing thing about the lies that people are willing to believe. You know, none are as blind as those who refuse to see. And this is really what's amazing in terms of, and for me, what really bothers me, being a Christian, is the Christians who actually unequivocally supported Donald Trump. There were more white evangelicals who voted for Trump this time around than 4 years ago. And it's amazing that they could look at this landscape and see all of the violence that took place, especially with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Look at all of this and throw even more support behind Donald Trump. There is a contingency that believes that policy matters more than character.
Wow.
And because there was someone who was lifting up their policy, they chose to ignore character. Yeah. And whenever you ignore character, you're going to compromise your integrity and your values. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his very soul? And that's exactly what has happened in many evangelical circles. Because they put policy over character, they have lost so much credibility in terms of the faith. And that's the amazing thing that I've watched happen. The other thing with the United States in terms of how we see things, we have to get out of this idea of this will never happen here.
Right. Yeah.
You know, before 9/11 happened, we kept on saying things like this, that'll never happen here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at Nazi Germany, and we'll look at things like that and say, well, this will never happen here. It just did.
Yes, it did.
It just did.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the amazing thing. It is a naiveness and an arrogance at the same time. When you start operating in the mindset that this will never happen, you are right for it happening. And this is exactly what, when they were putting up Trump's flag, that was the same thing as when they hung the Nazi flag in Germany.
Wow.
No different. No
Wow.
different.
Wow. Let's do this, Pastor Coleman. It's 29 minutes to the hour. We're going to go into another 1 minute station break on Conversation Unplugged, and then we're going to come back because we really need to unplug some more about what took place yesterday.
The heart of sports is moving, aren't we, Jeff?
Same bad time, different bad channel.
You can still catch us each and every Friday on
This is a 30-second one. Want me to throw in
and then
another
on
30?
97.5 Fanatic Networks via their podcast.
More great guests, more interesting stories, and even more fun commentary and hijinks.
That's right. We'll join you this Friday at 4 p.m. on WWDB 860 AM for the Heart of Sports.
We're back on Conversation Unplugged, WWDB 860 AM. Our subject is political insurrection at the United States Capitol with our guest, Rev Dr Jerome Coleman. If anybody would like to call in, render a comment, facilitate discussion, Call 1-888-329-3306. 1-888-329-3306. Pastor Coleman, did I miss something? I really need to ask this question. Did I miss something? And let me share with you why I'm asking this question. Did I miss something? Donald Trump has an evangelical council that was very vocal when it came to building the wall, and they were very vocal when it came to Brett Kavanaugh being on the Supreme Court, and they were very vocal when he nominated someone to the female, I forget her name, to the Supreme Court. They were very vocal, in that regards. Very vocal in the beginning of his presidency. Anybody who opposed Donald Trump, they were very, very vocal. When it came out about his marriage indiscretions and everything, well, he's human. We can forgive him and all this other stuff. Everybody has bad character and flaws, and we can't hold him accountable for what he did in the past. They were very vocal, very, very vocal. Did I miss something, Pastor Coleman? Because I haven't heard anything as of yet from Franklin Graham.
No, you didn't. You didn't miss anything. What that is the silence of hypocrisy. That's all it is the silence of hypocrisy. This is no different, and this is where, when we talk about as pastors, our people grabbing hold of biblical principles in the examples and the illustrations and the stories that we find in the Bible. There is always a contingency of Pharisees and Sadducees. There's always a contingency of people who are religious but don't have a relationship with Christ.
Right.
And are positioning themselves. It's like Caiaphas said in terms of orchestrating the resurrection of Christ. It's better for one man to die than us to lose our place in our nation. So there are people who are totally interested in holding on to positions of power. And so, no, this is not surprising. This is the silence of Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees who are hypocritical, who have no interest in the salvation of souls or the betterment of people. All they are interested in holding on to is positions and power. And that's the sad thing with all of this. Even if Donald Trump, hypothetically, let's say Donald Trump was seeking truth. Let's say he was seeking Jesus Christ. He had a bunch of people around him who had no interest in Christ at all. What he has around him are people who use Christ to hold on to positions of power and influence.
It seems like there's definitely a double standard here. It definitely, definitely seems like there is a double standard. And what I mean by double standard, how Black Lives Matter protesters is treated is totally different than how the Trumpsters were treated yesterday. A double standard. And I know people will complain about, they go again, et cetera, but there's just it's a double standard that's hard to digest. Now, if the Million Man March, when that happened in 1995, I remember traveling from North Carolina up to Baltimore, because God bless his soul, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, we all participated in the Million Man March. Pastor Coleman, there were signs in Virginia warning to stay out of D.C. if need be because of the march. You got me? And the security that was there, to ensure that there was no lawlessness that took place. It was there. You know what I mean? But yet the security that was at the Capitol yesterday and what happened was pathetic. What that situation has told our enemies is that we are more vulnerable than they thought. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and this is one of the epitomes of systemic racism that Mike Pence denied exists in this country. And that's the frustration of many African Americans, as we keep on pointing to incident after incident after incident where there's a double standard. And there comes a point where you got to stop casting your pearls before swine and stop throwing holy meat to dogs. There's a point where we have to move on trying to convince certain factions that systemic racism exists. And we just got to move forward and start addressing it and challenging it ourselves. That's why we have to educate ourselves in terms of who we put in the office and who we put in the leadership. We have to have people who deal with reality. is what you said earlier. Peaceful protesters were fired on and tear gas was thrown at them for a photo op for a president to stand in front of a church holding a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Then these were actually peaceful protesters.
Right.
And now you have this yesterday where you have terrorists and insurrectionists coming and storming the Capitol, and you don't have any of those things happening.
Right.
And the question becomes, why is it one for the other and not one? Number one, it shows you how much Trump has intimidated so many people in Congress. That's what it shows you, number one. But number two, it also shows you the double standard. Like you said, with Black Lives Matter, with those protests, how many police officers were shooting tear gas and firing rubber bullets and dispersing peaceful protesters. We're not talking about the people, that small faction that took advantage of that. We're talking about peaceful protesters. The majority of those people at the Capitol were terrorists, rioters, and insurrectionists. Mm-hmm. This was no little faction. This was what they came to do, incited by a president who told them to get wild, who actually said during the Black Lives Matter protest that people would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Right.
And now with this, he's talking about how we love you, we understand your pain. And really?
Yeah.
If anybody didn't understand what I was saying years ago, that Donald Trump is amoral, he's an amoral person. He does not care about anybody but himself. And all he has is interest.
Right.
And what he does is invest in his interest to promote himself. I've been saying that for years, that he has no friends. He's the modern day Herod. If it meant his promotion and sacrificing his kids, he would. His kids just don't believe it. But if it came down to that, that's who he is. He is Herod. He is Nebuchadnezzar. He is all of those people incarnated once again. And that's why I told you my disappointment is with a certain section of Christianity, because this personality has manifested itself throughout all of biblical history, whether it's Sennacherib, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar, whether it's Herod. This personality has reared its ugly head over and over again. And you would think that the people of God, with the wisdom of God, would be able to see this and yet turn a blind eye to it. That's the amazing thing to me. More than and you understand what I'm saying. It's more than people who don't have a relationship with God. Because when you don't have a relationship with God, you're driven by your own self-interest. But when you allegedly have a relationship with God where it's about his glory and about loving your neighbor as yourself, and you get behind something like this, I question your definition of what Christianity really is.
Wow. The Variety magazine has an article that says the MAGA riot in Washington was the natural culmination of Donald Trump's influence and just maybe its swan song. It goes on to say, since today's insurrection was all about the issue of election fraud, the Georgia vote lent the events of an irony extraordinary bite. And what it indicated is that the whole Biden stole the election. Issues of perilous and scary, as it has often seemed, has proved in the end to be the ultimate political orgy of hot air. A great deal of smoke without fire. The far-right uprising in Washington today was framed in the minds of those who participated in the Boston Tea Party / burning Riksdag defining moment, but it felt more like the last gasp of Trumpism heard around the world. Wow, some powerful statements. What's your thoughts there, Pastor Coleman?
I agree. There was one pastor I was listening to maybe the other day, older pastor, and he was saying that sometimes when you have an enemy, it's better for you not to commit homicide because it makes you look bad. It's better to do what Jesus did, let him commit suicide.
Wow.
And that's exactly what Trump and the right wing has done. They've committed suicide by what they did. Now the thing that we have to be wary of is this: we can't put all of our trust in the Democratic Party either.
Right, right.
And that's what happens. We have a tendency to overcorrect, and an overcorrection is still wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to maintain what we believe is factual and truth and hold both core parties accountable to that. We can't all of a sudden put our eggs in one basket. We can't listen to people like Rand Paul who want to get rid of the Electoral College and things of that nature. There was nothing wrong with what happened with this election, but there are people who will start shouting for election reform because of what's happened. We know that there was no election fraud, and we got to be careful of those people who are trying to act like they have the best interest of the country in mind, wanting to quote unquote do election reform, because once again, a lot of times these are elephants in sheep's clothing, trying to act like they have the better interest of people in mind, but they're trying to further a different agenda. And so we got to be careful that we don't react to this thing in terms of our election process as if something was underhanded and wrong, because the minute we start doing that, we start to give them fodder that perhaps something was amiss with this election when it wasn't.
And so you just said something here about the Rand Pauls and things of that nature. The one thing is constantly consistent about the institution and practice of racism in America is that whenever someone feels that a minority group has won or has gained an advantage, they change the rules. Think about it, they change the rules. And so when we hear Rand Paul and them talking about election reform and things of that nature, what we're actually witnessing here is someone trying to move the goalposts and change the rules to their advantage, which is a sad commentary in America. You know, let's start this out and then pick it back up in about a minute or two. We're going to go to another station break. But the situation that happened at the U.S. Capitol was also, United States Capitol is a similar situation on a lower scale that played out in Harrisburg 48 hours ago. There was a certification of an election. There was a person that was elected in Allegheny County, which is right outside of Pittsburgh or in the Pittsburgh area. That person was duly elected by residents in the state of Pennsylvania, and a Republican-controlled, I believe that was U.S. Senate, refused to seat that particular person, and as Mike Pence was the one who oversaw the certification process in the United States Capitol, the Lieutenant Governor Fetterman was supposed to act in that role as the Lieutenant Governor in the state of Pennsylvania, and the Republicans had him removed. Let's talk about that briefly, and then we'll pick back up at the station break. What in the world is going on, Pastor Coleman?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. That's why we can't give into this idea of mass election fraud, ballots being thrown out, because the minute we give an inch, those kind of people who are perpetrating this lie will say, see, I told you so. That's why they're doing all this election reform and things of that nature. This is the kind of nonsense that we have to stand and fight against. And this is what I'm hoping that happens with this. People have been silent about these kind of things. People who say, I don't want to have anything to do with this, they're the people we need to now have start speaking up and speaking out and really lending their voice, because what they're doing in Harrisburg is ridiculous. And any of those persons who are perpetrating this lie and this fraud, people need to take note of that. They need to write to them and tell them what they're doing is wrong. They need to call their offices and tell them what they're doing is wrong. And they need their constituency to do it. They need there needs to be people who really are patriots, like you mentioned earlier. People who really want the greater welfare of this country. And it doesn't matter if I'm Republican or Democrat. If the person that I voted in office and is representing me is not doing the right thing, I have to be willing to lift up my voice and say that, and not turn all of this thing into a partisan issue. It is our partisanism that has caused all of this rift too, where nobody can work across the aisles, and we have to stop that.
Mm-hmm. We definitely do. We definitely do. We're going to go to another station break on WWDB 860 AM. You listen to Reverend Dr. Weathers, and our guest is Reverend Dr. Jerome Coleman.
What is hope? Hope to me was just that he would get to come home. I had no idea how hard it would be once he got back.
I wish she'd stop drinking so much. She thinks it's helping, but it's not. I hope she sees that soon.
I act like I don't care if he comes to my games, but I hope he does.
I used to hope he'd find happiness again. Now I hope our marriage makes it.
I hope Grandpa will get help. He thinks it's too late, but it's not.
With everything that he's going through, I hope he sees a counselor. I just want my brother back.
I hoped he'd get help. Stop hoping things would get better on their own. He told me to stop asking. I didn't. Then one day he asked for a ride.
Hope is knowing there are other families just like yours, that the veterans they love got help and recovered. Go to maketheconnection.net and turn hope into action.
You're back on Conversation Unplugged, WWDB 860 AM. Pastor Coleman, I'm stepping up my game now in regards to live streams. So this particular live stream broadcast, well, one, it is on 860 AM WWDB, but for those who can't gain access to the radio station and everything, this is being live streamed on my Facebook page, Vision of Hope Baptist Church Facebook page, Conversation Unplugged Facebook page, as well as Conversation Unplugged YouTube channel. I've learned how to work that through StreamYard. So, yeah, man. So people, oh, he only got a little bit of viewers here. No, I got a little bit of viewers here, a little bit of viewers there, a little bit of viewers there, and it makes a whole totality of a whole bunch of viewers. Just a quick sidebar. My sister, Sigma, she's a Zeta Gina Power Prison out of North Carolina. She says, "Hey, bro, what's up, sis? Thank you for checking out Conversation Unplugged. Got to give a Blue Fi shout out." Now, getting back to the subject here. You and I, we talked about this last night. Bruce Alec and I, we talked about it on our, in the Facebook Live session that we had representing the Pennsylvania Baptist State Convention. Here's a two-part question. What can we do as pastors? That's the first question. And how should the church respond to this insurrection that took place at the Capitol in the United States, as well as at the Capitol in Pennsylvania?
Wow, what can we do as pastors? I think one of the things that this reminds us of as pastors is the influence that our voices and our actions have. And so when we stand up in the pulpit on Sunday, or we're teaching midweek, or we're even on radio broadcast, we need to weigh carefully the words that we're saying, because they have influence on people. It is a reminder to us as pastors that the truth is important, that facts are important, and that when we stand up and preach and teach and comment on things, we need to make sure that we've done our research and we've done our homework. And there are too many times where we are guilty of the same thing. We'll perpetrate clickbait. We'll read a story and not read and research what's behind that story. Sometimes we let our emotions get the best of us, and we'll post things on Facebook and social media that in retrospect maybe we shouldn't have posted. Right. That we need to think 2 to 3 times when we open up our mouths to speak what's going on in society, and when we preach from the word, that we make sure that our opinion is subservient to what God is saying.
Right. Yeah.
And as the church, I just believe as the church, we just need to speak out more against injustice. We can't be afraid. Man, there's so many churches that are standing up of different hues that are saying things about what's going on in the political landscape. And we become so fearful of losing our 501(c)(3)s that we won't see threes, that we won't say anything. And we've got to stop doing that. There's enough in the Bible that talks about oppression and the oppressor, that talks about prejudice and discrimination and racism, that if we take the time and we meditate upon the scriptures, we can craft a message that our people will understand what we're saying.
Yeah, and the misnomer here, I think it's the right word to use, is as a 501c3, we can speak out against issues. We can't endorse anyone for the president of the United States or endorse any particular candidate, period. But we can speak out on issues. Issues like this craziness that happened at the White House, we can speak out against that. Trying to steal an election, we can speak out against that. Homelessness, poverty, we can speak. But if Joe Blow or Jane, Sister Jane comes to our congregation and says, we want you to endorse, our candidacy, we can't do that. They can come speak. Both parties have to be given an opportunity, but they can speak, but we can't endorse. And I think that's the misnomer here. Moving forward, I find myself in the middle, wanting to do, not knowing what to do. And I'm at a point I'm frustrated as well. And we talked about the frustration yesterday because we're in institutions or organizations, et cetera, that may not be of the same ethnicity as us. And it's either a passive role, non-spoken role, or turn the other head role, but nobody seems to really want to address the particular issue for what it is. You know what I mean? And so find ourselves in a moment of frustration. If someone would come to you, Pastor Coleman, one of your parishioners, and would ask the question, one, where was God in all of this yesterday? And two, how come God didn't stop it? What would be your response?
Well, I think that what I would say is that God is sovereign. And I think God was in this. God was showing clearly who our president is. And what God was demonstrating to us is that ideas, ideologies have consequences, that truth does matter, and that we need to get back to that. I think God's hand was all in this. The casualties could have been worse than what they were. There's a lot. God, I preached a sermon, I don't know if it was this Sunday or last Sunday. I said, sometimes we pray to God and we think that when God answers our prayers, that he answers with roses. But sometimes God answers with thorns.
Wow.
And the thorns are designed to remind us of our weaknesses so that we can depend on him. And what this may, I hope, demonstrated to people is that you can't put your trust in the president or a presidency. You can't put your trust in Congress or Capitol Hill. You got to put your trust in God, man. And once you put your trust in God and God starts to illuminate you and give you insight, that's when you can start making wise decisions.
Wow.
And so for somebody who would say that to me, I see God all in this. The other side of it is, even as we preach and teach, we can't be driven by political ideologies. While we can address them, we can't be driven by them. We may create a little tribalism of people who are following our political ideology, of self-righteous and angry people, both on the right and the left. But you will ultimately lose your influence if you are driven by political ideology. People are not looking for that when they come to church. They're looking for Christ, man. And we have to give them an alternative to all the nonsense that they're dealing with in the culture. We got to give them Jesus, understanding that Jesus is the answer and that the principles of Scripture can help us handle anything that comes in life.
Yes, Jamila Melvin, she agrees with you. She said, yes, trusting God. We're getting ready to close out. It's 5 minutes to the hour. We're coming to a close. The next subject, Pastor Coleman, you and I, we have to talk about, we can't really touch on it now, but Raphael Warnock won the United States Senate in Georgia, and there has to come, I have to bring you back so we can talk about the power of the Black church. Yeah, the power of the black church. Yeah, yeah. People have underestimated the spiritual, political, and community influence that the black church has had since being in the hush harbors back in slavery. Now that's a whole nother subject. Maybe a workshop or something you and I could put together virtually and work on. But let's talk about that. Hey, Pastor Coleman, thank you for coming on Conversation Unplugged. We have to bring this to a close. You listen to Rev Dr Jerome Coleman. Our subject was political insurrection at the United States Capitol. We thank you for tuning in. Keep our country in prayer. Keep political parties in prayer. Keep our communities, our families in prayer. And even though you may not agree with the craziness of Donald Trump, keep him in prayer, because we're all in need of prayer. If God allows us to have breath next week, let's unplug another conversation next week. It was a blessing and a pleasure talking to you today on Conversation Unplugged. This is Reverend Dr. Wayne M. Weathers. I'm now going to unplug my voice and plug it back in next week so we can have another conversation. Take care and God bless.
Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged.